Hi everyone, my name is Mahad. I'm one of the MCAT tutors here with Inspira. It's very nice to meet you. I have pretty extensive teaching experience both across formal and informal settings. Somewhere along the way in undergrad, I learned about myself that I find teaching very gratifying. And so I was lucky enough to be involved in a lot of different opportunities, like being a TA in undergrad, teaching medical education across the city to elementary school classes, and I've been a tutor for the MCAT for quite some time now as well, having taught dozens of students over the last few years. Teaching to me is highly gratifying, that knowledge translation aspect and working one-on-one with a person to really help them to succeed. And it's something I hope I can continue in my career as a resident and ultimately as a physician. So what I think sets me apart is one thing I've always tried to focus on is trying to develop a conceptual understanding of difficult material. So when things are very difficult, breaking it down into small digestible chunks is something I've always found works well for students. But also conceptually understanding ideas. For example, if we can understand physically and picture what it means for a fluid to be non-compressible, and how affecting the area of flow will affect the volumetric flow rate, things like that. I love to work through students with that and develop kind of that physical understanding of the world around us and how these principles that we're talking about can actually apply, particularly in the sciences. And I find that it offloads a lot of the cognitive burden and removes us from having to memorize things with rote memorization to more so having a conceptual understanding that we can apply on test day. And that's something that I think really sets my tutoring style apart. Oftentimes with students, I'll focus on a few key passage analysis techniques, and these are really important in making sure that we are analyzing the passage and drawing out as much information as possible. Then we focus on applying the conceptual aspect, plus everything we reviewed in content review. I think those are the things that make a student very strong when it comes to excelling on the MCAT, and I think those approaches are what set me apart as an MCAT tutor. I would say my greatest strength as a tutor really stems from my genuine love for teaching and my curiosity toward the sciences. And I find across the sciences, across CARS, whatever section it may be teaching, there's a genuine passion that I feel toward teaching, and I think that helps me to really get along well with my students and to see through that they try their best to excel on the MCAT. My curiosity for the sciences has been there since I was a kid. It's kind of what led me to initially engineering and then ultimately medicine. And I think that curiosity is important. It really lends me to having a more passionate style of teaching, which I think a lot of my students have enjoyed. I often try to connect passages and concepts that we're learning to the medical setting. So I can share stories about what I've seen in the ER, or oftentimes how we as physicians might need to interpret imaging or lab results. And I find that that's very important because number one, it garners a lot of interest in the session. And number two, it kind of contextualizes the bigger picture of why we're actually studying all of this material and how it will make us stronger physicians. The greatest story that sits with me is really, I remember I was working with one student who had a lot of learning difficulties. He also was very busy. He had full-time work, full-time school, and he's studying for the MCAT as well. And you can imagine, some of you can relate to this, it really, really makes the process of studying for the MCAT more challenging. And you have to be much more time efficient in terms of how you're dedicating your time. And I remember when I was focusing on this student, the one thing I really wanted to drill home was the importance of passage analysis techniques so that when it comes test day, he's able to extract as much as possible from the passage and apply everything that we've talked about. And I remember sometime after he wrote the MCAT, he sent me an email and he told me that during the MCAT, he could hear my voice in his head essentially speaking to him and telling him how to analyze the passage. And honestly, it was a very heartwarming thing for me because it reminded me that, that one-on-one connection that I developed with a student, it lasts deep into the MCAT and even beyond that. I genuinely believe that everyone can do well on the MCAT. It really requires finding early on what study technique works best for you. Whether you're coming from a traditional or a non-traditional background, the important thing is there are many different ways to approach the MCAT. You'll find some people focus heavily on content review before transitioning into a practice period, and other people tend to develop their content review through practice alone. And I see this time and time again with my students. They have many different techniques that work. And finding that technique early on, I think, is important. As a tutor, I really want to make sure that we can hone in kind of what technique works best for you, and therefore allow us to extract as much as we can out of the content review and the practice phases. My passion for tutoring really just stems from a love for science education and particularly medical education. I really love those like aha moments, the light bulb going off in a student's brain. I can see it in their eyes when a concept clicks, and I know that that concept will stick with them long term. I think that's extremely important. And that passion for me, the curiosity towards the sciences, I feel if I can invoke a bit of that curiosity, and if I can, change the way that we view the world and how we view medicine at large, for me, it's all worth it. As someone who approached the MCAT, without a tutor, without a mentor, it was a bit of a daunting experience. And so I find when I'm able to connect one-on-one with a student and I'm able to really share that passion for learning, I think that's a really meaningful and gratifying experience for me. And if I'm able to impart upon them that, we're in this together and that this is kind of a team effort for their success, I think it provides a bit of security and a sense of having someone in your corner